1991 reforms, Make in India has been the stated objective of successive governments with the hope to build domestic manufacturing capability as well as grab a share of global trade. Now, while there have been significant improvements in enhancing the share of manufacturing to GDP, the aspirational target of 25% has been elusive, and it's been elusive for long. But in a post-COVID world, with global supply chains being redistributed, there is a new thrust towards drawing in manufacturing investments. Moreover, with the growth of the Indian economy, the domestic market presents a compelling opportunity for both domestic and foreign investors. But what has changed to create a more enabling environment? As per experts, India today is more cost competitive than it previously was. The government has brought in measures to incentivize scale. A young working population is part of the advantage as well. And these are just some of the factors that make it a much more compelling manufacturing story than previously. So the big question, is this India's manufacturing breakout moment? Hello and welcome to the CNBC-TV18 PwC CEO Dialogues. I'm Shireen Bhan, and joining me this evening to take the conversation forward, Sanjeev Krishan, Chairperson at PwC India. Sanjeev, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us. Bharat Kaushal, MD of Hitachi India Private Limited. Bharat, appreciate you joining us. Shashank Srivastav, the Executive Director at Maruti Suzuki. Mr. Srivastav, many thanks for joining us. Mr. Tyagarajan, MD of Blue Star, here with us as well. We've also got Preeti Bajaj, the CEO and MD of Luminous Power Technologies. Preeti, it's good to have you join us here at the CEO Dialogues. Atul Lal, the Vice Chairman and MD of Dixon Technologies, also here with us. Mr. Lal, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us. Sanjay Kapoor, the Chairman of Sona Comstar. Sanjay, it's great to have you here, back with us on CNBC TV18. Arun Shukla, the CEO of JK Lakshmi Cement, and Sudipta Ghosh, Industrial Products Leader and Partner at PwC. Gentlemen and Preeti, many thanks. We have a whole host of questions lined up for our panel, but before I get started, let me throw it across to Sudipta. Sudipta, my very first question to you, as you set out the context for the conversation that we intend to have this evening, is this India's manufacturing breakout moment? If it is, why is that the case? What's really changed, and what are the mega trends to watch out for?
Sure, thank you very much, Shireen. And you're right, we are seeing a lot of mega trends, and I'll kind of summarize that in 4 or 5 key points. The first one is around the changing customer expectations. In the industrial products world, traditionally, you have been manufacturing a physical product. But now the expectation is that how that product is going to be used. So you are looking at productized services, and you're talking about anything as a service. And that's where one of the important focus of many of these manufacturing organizations is to differentiate away from just being pure product companies to also service-oriented organizations, and that's where they can really differentiate, particularly in commoditized products, particularly in from export perspective, because you said because it's going to be the future for the country. So if you are going to export and lead this movement from an export-led perspective, we need to be focusing around quality and around the services, around the product. The second thing which is coming up, mega trend, is around the supply chain, and we have seen an enormous amount of changes around the supply chain, around the disruptions which are there in the supply chain, and their organizations are significantly investing in digitization in a very big way, because you need to have an end-to-end view of the entire supply chain before you can actually say where things can change and where things can go wrong and where you need to make that right kind of an intervention. The third thing which I'm going to say is that today is an era where excellence in manufacturing is going to be the most important thing, whether we are catering to the domestic market or whether we are doing an export. So when you are talking about quality, typically the digital operations, the way you are manufacturing, the way you are controlling the quality, the way you are having a complete visibility of the shop floor, the way you are addressing safety, and also the way you are addressing ESG in your manufacturing process is going to come in a very big way in terms of how do you define the quality which is coming out and being produced right in front. Apart from all of these, there are some enabling functions which are very important. And the most important enabling function is the people. Because there is a huge amount of focus in terms of delivering excellence. How does organizations ensure that they're building the right level of leadership, the right amount of skills needed to deliver some of these outcomes, for for the customer. And the second enabling factor which I would like to add is all the support functions, the back office functions which needs to be automated, scaled, because every organization in India is looking for growth. So when you're looking for growth, how are you ensuring that you are building your entire back office for scale? So when you're talking about digital operations or you're talking about automation, then you're looking at a lot of finance processes, HR processes, IT processes, how they are going to scale up going forward. So those are the 4 or 5 things I thought I'll kind of share with you, which summarizes the mega trends along with the opportunities which it presents ourselves, to us ourselves in this manufacturing world.
Well, thanks very much, Sudipta, for setting the context and presenting us a list of the mega trends. And even within those mega trends, as you pointed out, there are several sub-themes that are running through, whether it is ESG, it's the various transitions that are taking place, especially as far as the energy transition is concerned, or it's even things like decentralization of factories and digitization of factories and decentralization of the supply chain in itself. But Mr. Lal, I want to come to you now because, your peer sitting next to you, Mr. Srivastava, you've seen the Indian manufacturing story play itself out over the last 3+ decades since liberalization. What I want to understand from you is, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen several policy interventions. We've seen a move towards higher import duties. We've seen a move back towards import substitution across different sectors, from defense to the sector that you're currently operating in. We've just seen the most recent announcement coming in from the government on curbing imports as far as laptops, etc. are concerned. I want to start by understanding from you, how do you see this playing out? In the long term, it is likely to be advantage for companies like yours, but in the short term, what does it really mean?
Thanks, Shireen. Thanks very much. You see, for electronic manufacturing industry, we are of a firm conviction that this is our inflection point. In our industry parlance, we call it our Y2K moment. Please appreciate, anywhere around the globe, right from Japanese history of Meiji transformation or chaebols of Korea, you need state intervention, you need some hand-holding in the stages of infancy of any industry. And we firmly believe that government policy framework is absolutely aligned in that direction. So our convictions are basically 3 or 4. One, the electronics products requirement in the country, which were largely serviced till 5-7 years back through imports, are going to be serviced through domestic manufacturing. Second, over a period of time, this manufacturing is going to deepen and the value addition is going to significantly increase. Third, also over a period of time, the IP is going to belong to the Indian industry. Fourth, if not all, in many of the specific product categories, India is going to become globally comparative and we're going to service the global markets. And one can see that trend. Mobile exports, Apple shifting its footprint into India. Now, this is just the beginning of the story. We feel what happened to the auto sector is going to be replicated in the electronics manufacturing sector in this country. Specifically responding to the laptop and the IT products being covered now under licensing. So there are various viewpoints to it. But from the manufacturing industry, we are of a firm view that this again is a positive step. Please appreciate the Indian domestic industry, manufacturing industry, will take just 6 to 8 months to ramp up the production. And in the intervening period, the government is coming up with the requisite policy interventions to ensure that demand is met, either through imports or enhancing local production. Please be rest assured, the industry has adequate bandwidth to manufacture at a cost which is comparable to the global manufacturing companies. It's also ensured through the IT PLI 2 that the requisite value addition will keep on enhancing year on year. And I'm very sure that in 3-5 years, you'll have some Indian solutions coming out of tablets and laptops. So we welcome it. It's a debatable point because there are various free market pundits who have a contrary viewpoint. We welcome that. But then we are of a firm view, these initiatives are very supportive, extremely important in building up the ecosystem. I was just in China yesterday, and still the kind of government support you see, you go to the various provinces, the land building is free, 100 acres, 1 million square feet constructed, nothing charged. Still on a mobile export, a provincial to state government would offer 5 RMB on any phone above $30. So economics is not just economics, it is political economics.
We're seeing that play out very clearly in the world that we live in today. A lot of the economic decision making is linked to political decisions as well. I don't want to get into the debate on how much government intervention is required or needed at this point in time. That'll take us enough time and we'll run out of time for our other panelists. But I just want to pick up on what you said, because I think that's where the concern stems from. You said that you believe in the next 3 to 6 months, domestic production should be able to cater to the demand. Is that so?
Yeah, we are very confident. The first level of manufacturing, which comprises of FATP and PCBA assembly, will happen. There is more than adequate capacity, capability, and bandwidth in the industry to execute that.
And you, at Dixon specifically, are you looking at ways of being able to fill this gap?
Yeah. For us, it's a large opportunity. Please appreciate that almost $8 billion of IT products are imported into India. So, yeah, we are going to jump at it.
You're going to jump at it. You believe that this is the Y2K moment for India's domestic IT industry. And of course, you're a big player in that market. But Mr. Srivastav, let me address the issue that we just heard there from Mr. Lal. He believes that what happened with the auto sector and the auto component sector, and we'll hear from Sanjay about that as well, is likely to be replicated across a whole host of sectors, mobiles, etc., could potentially look at that trajectory as well. I want to understand from you, as you look at the landscape today, what do you believe has changed? In many ways, Maruti was the creator of that inflection point as far as the Indian auto ecosystem was concerned. But as you look at the story today, what more do you believe needs to be done, and what can be replicated using the auto experience?
Yeah, so first of all, I must say that we have come a long way. When Maruti Suzuki came into manufacturing 40 years back, the penetration of cars in the Indian household was roughly 3 per 1,000. Today, it's about 27. Still very low when you compare with some of the developed nations like the US, where it is 840 something, Japan, which is close to 700. We have a huge room for growth. And the proof of that is that India is now the 3rd largest passenger vehicle market in the world. We, of course, have been the largest two-wheeler and three-wheeler and larger buses and so on and so forth, but now the 3rd largest passenger. That says something about our industry. We are looking at now, and there are many things changing, and I believe going forward, some of these things will pan out very quickly. One is that it is no longer about just manufacturing vehicles. We are now looking at mobility as the business, not necessarily transportation. It is mobility, not production and manufacturing. And that goes with some of the comments which he made about services. And that's also in line with consumer preference changes. For example, buying. Buying is now not just buying, financing, paying, taking the vehicle. It's also other options are available. Subscription, for example. That's something which Maruti Suzuki has also started. I also believe that the volumes will be a hugely different scale. Like he mentioned about the scale. And for Indian industry, currently we are at 4 million cars, passenger vehicles a year, expected in the next 6 years to cross 6 million plus. That's a huge jump, considering that we were just about 10 years back at less than 3 million, less than 2 million. So the next billion seems to be coming much faster. And for Maruti Suzuki, we have come to this stage where we will be making this year about 2 million plus vehicles, but we are looking at 4 million in the next 6 years, 2030, which means what took us 40 years to come to 2 million, we'll have to do and more in the next 6 years. So these changes are happening, and not just that, the technologies are changing. You would have heard about CASE, which is about connected cars, about autonomous cars, about shared mobility, about electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And things are changing, and a big advantage for India is not just the scale, but also that some of these new technologies is something which inherently we are strong at. There is more software going into vehicles now. Electric vehicles will be run on software more or less. And these are things where we are very strong in any case. So I think if you ask me, going forward, what the scenario will be, I think it's going to be scale. It's going to be great for India because we have those skills. And third, I think the technology scenario will level the ground for India to participate in a big way in the automobile industry.
Well, you know, India's already a significant player in the global automotive industry, and you're saying that the headroom for potential future growth from here on is higher. I'll come to that in just a second, but let me get Sanjay to comment on what we've heard there from both Mr. Lal as well as Shashank Srivastav. And I want to understand from the components perspective, because if Maruti is talking about growing from 4 to 6 million just for them by 2030, that means that it's going to have a multiplier impact as far as the ecosystem is concerned. So not just domestic, but also the export opportunity, which is something that you've been leveraging on and this sector has been leveraging on.
Thanks, Shreen. So we're prepared for Maruti to go to from 2 to 4 million as an industry. We clocked our highest ever sales this year at $70 billion as a component industry with a $20 billion export. We're even in import and export. Last year we were a trade surplus when it came to exports. This year we've had a slightly $200 million deficit. However, it's a huge change from where we were 3 years ago, where we were in $2 billion of a deficit. The automotive industry has seen great disruption. One of the things that's driving the component industry is the investment in technology. Companies are actively investing in technologies, actively looking for technologies because the competitive landscape has completely changed. And you talk about software. Software is going to play a very big role in the auto component industry. Connectivity, telematics, autonomous, the ecosystem is changing. So the opportunities, what we're calling challenges, the opportunities are immense. I'm so glad to hear about electronics and localization because we are a large importer of electronics across the board, not just in the automotive industry. And we're working closely with the electronics industry, in fact, to look at how we can localize much faster. But the one point I want to touch upon is what's changed really in our landscape is that interest rates in the West have come to the same level as us. The only difference is we know how to do business with a 7% interest rate and they don't. So that's really going to play to our advantage and really create a level playing field. And therefore, I feel that we will see much more opportunity in terms of manufacturing. We're seeing the China 1+1 strategy or the India +1 strategy playing out in our favor. And that's illustrative of the fact that our exports have grown. This year, in fact, our revenue grew 33%, despite the fact that vehicle sales have dropped globally. So we're really looking at this is our time. And companies of our generation are going to define the automotive industry in terms of how it's shaping up with electrification and all the other disruption.
Well, this is our time, Mr. Tyagarajan, and I know that the Indian manufacturing industry has been waiting for this time for a while now. As I said, that 25% share of GDP, of manufacturing to GDP has been elusive, but do you believe that the time has now come? And what, to your mind, are the enablers to propel the story forward?
Thank you, Shireen. It's not only that 25%. In the global trade, our share was 2% or so. It is exciting times. This is my 44th year of career, and I haven't seen this kind of excitement in the industry so far. In specifically air conditioning, refrigeration industry, the penetration levels in India has been low, and we were dependent on huge amount of imports, number one. Number two, this is an industry which not only lacked scale. You will see this theme coming about.
We can see the scale theme running through right across the panel. Yeah.
I'm adding to that the sustainability issue. In air conditioning, we do have the problem of not only power consumption, ozone depletion, global warming related issues connected with refrigerants. You will find the third S is connected with smart manufacturing, because suddenly you are going to compete with someone like China. Like our domestic market size last year was 8 million, it may be 10 million this year. China produces 120 million air conditioners, and their domestic market size is 88 million. So they manufacture air conditioners like pencils or ballpoint pens. That's the reality. So if you want to compete with them, you need to be investing in R&D, innovation. That subject has not come in. It's going to be one challenge. With some 0.6% of GDP R&D investments, I don't think we will make it. The private sector investment in R&D will have to go up. The last one is, Maruti understands this very well, that Indian market is affordable, aspirational middle class. So therefore, how will you produce a product at affordable range? You know, the business school taught some premium and all. I don't think that theory is any more true. So you have to, you're fighting against time. Quickly you have to do it if you want to participate in the global supply chain. The greatest enabler had been, that political stuff that was said, the import duty, you cannot import air conditioners with refrigerant filled, that became a barrier. Second is the PLI scheme, which has helped air conditioning industry to commit investments. Our manufacturing capacity, that industry's manufacturing capacity, is going to double within 18 months. Market is
Will demand double in 18 months?
I don't think so. The point I want to make is, what is going to happen is this 4,500, 5,000 crore of PLI. See, PLI is misleading statement. It is not production-linked incentive. It is a sales-linked incentive. One will have to show the incremental sales.
Yeah.
So what the companies are going to do is dilute this PLI in the pricing. So the product is going to become affordable.
Which is good news for the consumer.
It's good news for the government. It is good news for the company because you have created an infrastructure. So that scheme is helping. But as Sudipta said, what I am finding is, I don't think we have people to execute all this. The manufacturing talent is very poor in the country. First of all, I come from sales and marketing background. I know this. We all pampered sales and marketing guys with higher salaries. The manufacturing guys were not paid at all. And so where are you? We are now trying to poach from here and there and manage. That talent is not there. They all will know manufacturing engineering as a discipline, it is not there. We do not have, we all import machinery from Korea, Japan, China and manage. That ecosystem has not developed. And, but still, the Indian spirit is very high. The transformation that is taking place is exciting. So at last we have arrived. And therefore it is exciting times.
Exciting times. We have arrived. Preeti, let me come to you now with what we just heard there from Mr. Tyagarajan. And I think it was right of him to also list out some of the challenges. While we've talked about the opportunities, list out some of the challenges that the industry will have to grapple with. And to his mind, you know, ironically, manpower is going to be one of them, which is again something that, you know, in India, where you talk about this large young working population, the question of employment and employability keeps getting, you know, talked about as well. But how do you see the ecosystem at this point in time? What are the specific opportunities that you believe you intend to leverage on? And one key challenge that you're worried about?
Wow, that's a series of questions. Thank you, Shireen. I think, you know, just to sort of set the context, Luminous Power Technologies is at the center of the energy transition, which is decentralizing energy, decarbonizing energy as an expectation of the consumer in an incredibly digitized world. So in this sort of dynamo effect, there is at the center the customer, and the customer who wants affordable energy when a power cut happens, or an affordable solution when he wants to cut his or her bills at the end. So that ability of the manufacturing industry to drive excellence with frugal innovation at the heart of it, I think will remain critical for India. In fact, I was having a meeting this morning, and there is a lot of investors and a lot of dynamism coming towards India to say that can we do these amazing solutions. And I think what we'll learn is that yes, you can, but there is a modularity effect, a price laddering. Excellence is paid for once it's proven. Frugal innovation is paid for at scale. And I think we have to remember that when we are thinking about manufacturing. Notwithstanding that, I see the ecosystem very positively. Positive because it is pushing us. I think these import bans, so to speak, by the government are a trigger. They've created an inflection point, so the industry has to respond. It has now created an opportunity, so we have to build in some best-in-class practices. We have to adopt automation to perhaps make sure that we are doing best-in-class manufacturing work and removing hazardous work so that there is employee safety, there is sustainability, and there is productivity. We think of that in terms of, to give you a simple example, we run a PCBA line in our Baddi inverter manufacturing plant. It is an SMT unit. So in the good old days, you used to do threading of PCBs. Sorry if it's slightly technical, but I am one of those imported experts. So I've returned from Australia to India in the midst of this excitement. So when you think about an SMT line and it is fully automated, it is able to do the heat map of a PCB. So instead of looking at whether the components are laid well by operators one after the other, you now have a machine doing a heat map and working out the gaps. So as you implement a lot of that, you have to reskill your employees. So we invest a lot in digital skilling. And that's really about being relentless in grabbing that data culture, driving it. And I can tell you, it's a whole different thing in India to do it in small towns in Gagret, to do it in Baddi, to do it in Haridwar. But the good news is Indian talent is hungry. They are hungry, they want to lead, and they want to learn. I kind of call it the L-cube philosophy. You have to lead the digital DNA change as a leader. You have to lab it, which means you have to allow your leaders to experiment and lab it, and then you have to live it. You have to have the courage to experiment, implement, and then change your processes. From a manual screwdriver, you have to go to an intelligent screwdriver, and then you have to retrain your entire line to say, hey, this screwdriver is not going to allow you to take this PCB to the next step if it detects that it's wrong automatically. So look at the screen. Don't look at the guy next to you. That's how it sort of works.
No, you know, you're absolutely right. And I think as we enter more and more into an era of productized services, as Sudipta was pointing out, and in a world of IoT and smart and digital factories, I think the L-cube articulation of yours is going to be something that will be replicated across.
We'll copyright that for Luminous Power Technologies.
We will copyright it. So that's Preeti on CNBC-TV18. The copyright is with you. But Kaushal, let me come to you now. From a Hitachi perspective, you've of course experienced the India story. What has changed your mind today? What would you say is the biggest change in the needle as you've seen it tick?
First of all, thank you. From a job interview to becoming a CEO, it never changes if you're last in a group discussion. Everyone's spoken.
Not yet. We've got one more.
But yeah, Hitachi is a Fortune 50 economy. Spread its wings all over the world, but in India, we've been 90 years, the oldest overseas presence, with plus of 30 companies across infrastructure, manufacturing, and also digital. So but it's now that India is becoming the epicenter. Like IMF says, for India contributing 15% to world GDP in 2023, Hitachi expects that over the ensuing period, we should contribute nearly 20% to Hitachi's GDP at $100 billion. And so when you look at India as a hub, you look at India for India and India for rest of the world. And within that too, there is a clear distinction between large component industries like railway business or power sector business and the smaller component industry, maybe automotive, elevators, and power electronics, and so on. So there's a critical distinction between seeing that the new capacity being built in India now vis-a-vis a decade ago, when India was just a cost-to-cost supplying market and overseas you made more margins. India is affording also better quality, and newer benchmarks have come across the world, across the board. So from that standpoint, as everyone echoed, product manufacturing is not production of product, but it's product and the service. There is a CapEx and OpEx component to leverage the scalability and affordability that the Indian volume offers, as much as you have access to global markets at the same time. And India's story has assisted intelligence to augmented intelligence journey, concomitantly running between, and also together with augmented intelligence to automated intelligence journey. So when you look at rail, there is modernization of Indian rail. There is urban mobility where no place in the world has 30 odd metro projects underway. And you also have the bullet train or very high precision engineering. You look at the power sector, we were doing the high voltage direct current transmission lines, but we had products in energy storage, in fast charging, in smart grids. Now the whole energy as a service ecosystem is evolving. And it's not just going to automation of the value chain of the industry, and it's also going to monetizing the asset class of the users on it, because it's a connected society. So when you look at the whole thing, it's blurring between a B2B type business and a B2C business when we talk about B2B2C, to get a better IRR in the Indian context. So it's very interesting. When I will talk about rail or power, I will have a different mindset. When I look at the smaller component industry, the PLI and everything gives you the cutting edge, because the world disruptors commonly with technology and progressive disruption, or with the pressure to include more society in it, or the sustainability and the urgency that surrounds it, is all going to come in together for that component. But when you look at transfer of technology related bigger schemes of manufacturing propulsion of a locomotive, or other things, you need transfer of technology, which is being encouraged by Ministry of Heavy Industries and the others in coordination. So it's a very interesting situation to take Hitachi up to a $20 billion business out of India by 2030.
Well, a $20 billion business out of India by 2030, that's the aspirational target that you've set for Hitachi here in India. Arun, I'm going to come to you now. And, cement is, of course, one of our legacy industries. So to understand from you, what changes that you're seeing at this point in time, and how much of the ESG factor are you starting to pencil into your plans as you look at expanding capacity and servicing both domestic as well as the export market?
Thanks, Sirin. And cement industry through a very interesting time now. You know that the growth has been very good in the last.
You've got plenty of new players in the business as well. Does that make it more interesting?
Yes, of course, I think. And ESG, to my mind, is playing a big role. It's not a challenge for us, but this is an opportunity. Just to give you a sense of what's happening in cement industry now. Cement industry perhaps the best in terms of efficiency if you compare with the best in the world. Just to give you a sense, we consume about 3.1 gigajoule of energy to produce 1 ton of clinker, whereas world average is 3.5 gigajoule. So we are much ahead of them. If you look at carbon intensity, if you produce 1 ton of cement, India is about 550 kg per ton of cement. World is about 600 kg. So we are much ahead of world in terms of efficiency. Now, what opportunity Indian cement industry is having now is technology or the digital intervention, right? Just to let you know, pyro process is the heart of the cement processing process, right? And now pyro process is being driven by AI ML. So kind of you can control your input, control your output, temperature, and all those process parameters to improve the efficiency. We have predictive maintenance now. Industry 4.0 was all about interconnected machine. Let me tell you, cement industry is leading the way in terms of maybe going to industry 5.0, which is about connection between machine and human now. So that is what the next frontier is. So I think efficiency is the next frontier for cement industry. We are ahead of the world, but I think within cement industry there is an intense competition of becoming more efficient. One, how somebody is going to be much more less intensive in terms of, carbon dioxide
Right.
emission, right?
Yeah.
Okay. People are going after renewable energy, which is not only about kind of mitigating CO2 emission, but also about improving efficiency. People are going for alternate fuel. Just to let you know, this is the one parameter where India is lagging behind the world. We are at about 4.4 to 5% of AFR, which is, alternative of fossil fuel, right?
Yeah.
World is about, more than 20%, right? So this is one area where people have started working on not only kind of mitigating carbon footprint, but also driving efficiency. The second thing. Third is, as you know, cement is a very logistics intensive business, right? It's about 25% cost. Now, like, JK Lakshmi Cement, we have integrated all our value chain. Across, value chain, full integration is there. And we are deriving a lot of, efficiency out of this. So I think efficiency is the next frontier in the cement industry. Of course, I think technology is playing a big role.
Right.
Just to give you another sense, why I'm, kind of, mentioning ESG, which is playing a big role in shaping cement industry going forward. Cement industry contribute about 7 to 8% of CO2 emission, right? Which is about, just to give you a sense, total carbon dioxide emission in India is about 2,500 million ton per annum, right? Cement contributes about 200 million ton per annum, right? This is what the ratio is, right? And in terms of carbon emission, India is, overall emission is third. USA, China, and then India, right? And since cement contributes about 7 to 8%, and all these initiatives, that is not only going to help us to mitigate the carbon dioxide emission, but also drive efficiency.
So
right?
that is going to be the big
So
focus
that is
and the
going to be a
priority.
big focus for us,
Sure. I get that. Sanjeev, I'm going to give you now the final say before we sort of collate everything that we've heard from our panel this evening. The running theme, plenty of excitement. This is India's moment. Our time is now. There's lots that's working in our favor. Economics, the political reframing, the multipolar world that we're currently living in, and of course efficiency, as we just heard, the big move towards sustainability, and that we just heard there from Arun as well, and this business of the global supply chain being rewired as well, potentially benefiting India today. What would you take away as the big themes so far?
So I think most importantly is the issue on scale. I think that issue came through quite well. I think the other issue was investment in technology. I think the scale issue and the investment in technology issue, and then of course the productivity issue. I would like to address those three issues because those three came along. I think first of all, if I take the the investment in technology, I mean it's very interesting to hear all the comments, but I must say that this requires sustained investments. I mean, I've seen many an organization who start on a journey to invest in technology, digital operations, as Sudipta said, and maybe expect returns very, very quickly. And if they don't get the returns, maybe in a couple of years, 2.5 years, or whatever, they start pulling back investments. So I think that's one thing. It requires sustained investments. I mean, even something like sustainability, for instance, right? I mean, it's not easy. I mean, for corporations which have strong balance sheets, it's another thing. But the contribution of MSMEs to India's industrial growth has to be very significant. They're already very significant player. Green financing is an issue. I mean, not everybody is able to raise financing on some of these aspects, and that I think is a very, very big issue. Likewise, I think the issue that was mentioned. When it comes to productivity, I think our productivity levels, I think some of us actually possibly higher on that radar. I think the productivity levels in India still starkly lower than many other parts of the world. And I think that's something, again, which requires focus. I mean, also look at factor costs. I mean, 2 weeks back, I was in Japan, and we were doing actually a roadshow with Japanese investors, and we started speaking about factor cost. On factor cost, on logistics, for instance, we are still below par. I mean, we want, we have been over-invested on roads. Now we are, with the Gati Shakti program and, the Sabarmala and all that, I think things, maybe will be a bit different. But, I mean, if you want to be logistics to be 8% of GDP, I mean, there is some distance to go. I think we are starting, the work is there. It's not, I don't want to undermine any of that, but I think it still requires some significant effort. And the last one I would say, to the point that has been mentioned a few times, just as we talk about, any services industries or even health for that matter, I think the investment in R&D and innovation, currently India is the innovation hub. I mean, there are so many startups. You're talking about artificial intelligence. I mean, you mentioned about AI, ML being used in processes. India, I mean, when we think about some of those, can we be making sustained investment in some of those areas to create new stuff out of India? And as Sudipta said, maybe create products which can be, which can use the services actually. So I think those few things from my standpoint.
No, and that's what the last point is what I want to take to Mr. Lal. And, you spoke about that in your initial comments as well, that the focus needs to now also be not just on manufacturing, but on IP creation and IP ownership as well. And there was a lot of talk about frugal innovation and the need for India to move up the value chain, so to speak. In terms of value, what do you really see the road ahead like? One of the big asks has been to get industry to do more as far as spending on R&D is concerned, and that continues to be a big challenge. But when you talk about IP creation, when you talk about building brands out of India for the world, what are we talking about? 5 years, 10 years? What will it take to actually do that? Because we're not there today.
So undoubtedly, Shireen, opportunity is immense. Scale is extremely important to generate the operating leverage. The next two directions, at least for the electronics industries to which I belong, there are two ways forward. One is the deepening of value addition, which requires the creation of the component ecosystem. And I think there is a strength in the balance sheet of the company to start investing in that. And again, it's going to happen the same way as it happened in the auto industry, through the partnership routes. You have to bring in technology. The second is owning the designs. So I'll give you an example of some of the domains in which we operate. For example, LED lighting industry. When we migrated from analog to LED lighting, let's say for our anchor customer Philips, they won't touch our designs. Today in some of the SKUs like LED bulbs, we are possibly globally number 4 or number 5. The complete IP belongs to Dixon. And we feel that we can take various comparators across the globe head on. So in some categories it's happening. But undoubtedly, if we have to sustain, if we have to take this journey forward, investments have to be made in R&D. You have to compromise on your earning growth for some time and invest in R&D. You have to build the organizations as institutions for longer term. So on this, there is no debate at all.
So what will your R&D spends, what are they likely to be, as a percentage of sales over the next few years, for instance, since you are talking about building for the future? And how much of this are you also looking at from a point of view of maybe buying out technology or getting into joint ventures and partnerships as well?
So please appreciate the EMS industry is a very frugal industry.
Because the margins are very thin.
We work on, globally also, and so is the case in India, that we work on operating margins of 4 to 5%. Now, in our case, the spend of R&D as a percentage of sales is not the way forward. Yeah, we were, let's say 7 years back at 100 engineers, 7 years or 2 years down the line, are we going to have 1,000? Yes. That's the way forward. Are we going to create some of the best labs which are available in the world? Yes, we will, undoubtedly. Are we going to create toolings and tool rooms of that level? Definitely, undoubtedly. So that's the way forward for us. The second question, sorry, was?
No, I was thinking, are you looking at M&A? Are you looking at
yes,
global
definitely.
partnerships?
So as I shared with you, in our industry also, it's going to be through the partnership route. You have to tie with globally the best. In fact, I would take this opportunity to mention that China is going through a slowdown. They are looking at opportunities everywhere else. That is where we should open up and take this advantage and partner them and bring that technology into India.
So you're saying partner with Chinese
Why
companies?
not?
No,
Why not?
I'm not. I don't have any ideological
yeah.
position on this, but there has been a position taken by the government on this specifically. So you're saying that there needs to be a review of that?
I would strongly recommend on that.
Strongly recommend partnering with Chinese companies.
That's right.
Okay. Mr. Srivastava, I want to also understand from you what we've heard there from Mr. Lal. One, of course, is this business of frugal innovation, and, Maruti has been one of the companies at the forefront of that. But more importantly, also catering to the changing consumer trends that we are seeing? Today everyone's talking about India being the third largest economy, but we're not really focusing yet on per capita consumption. The hope and the expectation is that we'll double that as well. If that were to happen, what would that mean in terms of the kind of preferences that consumers may choose to make and companies like yours would choose to service?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, which we have also been considering for long. Certainly the research shows that there is a inflection point at the per capita GDP level for cars when suddenly the volume shoots up and the penetration of cars per 1,000 household increases dramatically. We have seen it in Korea, Japan, Brazil, Poland, Mexico, everywhere. We have to prepare for it because while we are the third largest, as I mentioned, in passenger vehicle, but we are still 27 per 1,000, and I sometimes wonder कि अगर really or inflection point nahi hai ye, to then what would happen to the scale? I mean, it's going to be really, really huge, so we have to prepare for it. But I think a couple of things which we have to look at in the innovation front. And I think, personally, I believe that in our country, we do not have that sort of culture of innovation. And that comes because we are not experimentative. And that comes because we are like at the lower end of the per capita levels. So as it has been found that as the per capita GDP increases, you will find people getting more experimentative, including the consumers. That drives preferences for products, and that drives organizations, manufacturing, and IP generation, etc., into that direction. We have seen it happening in automobile already to some extent. The type of body type, segment type of this thing is largely now skewed towards the SUV-ish type of body type, which is and the average on-road price is now actually between 11 to 12 lakh, which just about 7-8 years back were about 5.5 lakhs. So that's like really changing preferences. Preferences are changing for technology also, the features that you put in. For example, hybrids have become really big now, because people are now, as the
You're
GDP,
still in the hybrid camp versus the EV camp?
we will discuss that. We'll go whichever camp the consumers are in. So our camp choice is very clear. But in terms of the technology also, preferences are going, as you said, could go in any way, and we have to follow. And it has also been driven by a lot of digitalization that's happening. So it's the buying process also is changing. So currently, for example, we get almost the highest number of inquiries that we get is on the digital platform, which was just 2-3% about 5-6 years back. So things are changing, and we have to change accordingly.
So how different will Maruti look 5 years down the line? Are we, we've already started to see a slowing in your entry-level segment where with the Alto and so on and so forth. Are you going to be more Jimny? Where are you going to play as far as Maruti is concerned?
Great question, and I think let me clarify to all the viewers here as also to all the participants. Maruti Suzuki in the sub 10 lakh segment has a market share of 62%. So people say you will never going to operate in the 10 to 20 lakh segment. I'm happy to share that in the 10 to 20 lakh segment also Maruti Suzuki is the market leader today. Although the market share is not as high. It is, you talked of preference changes. In this year, we said, people said SUVs are something which we are not, we are only into hatches. You will be happy to note that in July, we were the #1 manufacturer of SUVs in the country. So things are changing. We have now just launched the Invicto, which is in the 30 lakh range, which is something which people said Maruti Suzuki would never. But this is all because we are following that camp of the consumer, wherever they are. And I think it's very importantly, not only innovation, I would have liked to, if time had permitted, would talk about innovation. But I would also like to say that brand building is also getting, because at that levels, you have to have that the brand trust of consumers.
Yeah.
If you are able to price your products and therefore have sustainable growth going forward. I think it's Maruti Suzuki 5 years down the line. I mean, first you see 5 years back what it was, and now,
Yeah.
of course, it's a significant change. And I think 5 years later, it could be a totally different ball game altogether.
A totally different ball game altogether. Sanjay, are you prepared for this totally different ball game that Mr. Srivastav is gearing up to play? And more importantly, to Mr. Lal's point about, partnerships, technology transfer, as you look at this aspiration of looking beyond India, I mean, though the domestic opportunity today is a very large one, but if we want to move up in global trade and a share of global trade, what do you believe are likely to be the routes for that as well? How much of M&A and JVs are likely to be part of that?
Thanks, Shreen. I'm glad you asked me that question because I wanted to respond to Mr. Lal's comment on partnerships. I'm a strong believer that partnerships should be made so that you can learn technology and then go on it on your own. If you look at the Indian OEM market space, whilst the volume may be large, we're not more than 2% of global value. And therefore, playing only in the Indian market, joint ventures restrict you geographically. The aim of building a joint venture and a partnership or a technology agreement should be to learn the technology. As a business, we spend 3.5% of our revenue on R&D, and we like to play in maybe 4 or 5 products, but we want to do them really, really well. 75% to 80% of our business is outside of India in terms of exports. So we're continuously investing in R&D, and the only way you can really make money is if you can price your product better than your competitor. The only way you can do that is if your product is actually better than your competitor. And the only way you can do that is if you invest in R&D and in innovation. And that's really the mindset that companies in India and the auto component space need to have to really go global. And I think the opportunity to create a manufacturing hub for the world exists today in the auto component industry. And we need to leverage that opportunity, and we can only leverage that by investing in R&D. And I continuously talk about private sector's role being to invest in technology, learn technology. And today, I mean, for example, as a business, we have no joint ventures. We may have a product joint venture, but we don't have joint ventures because we don't want to be restricted just to the Indian market from a geography perspective.
No, I get that. And, Mr. Tyagarajan, speaking about this global aspiration, and in many ways, for years we've been talking about this India-China comparison, and specifically even within the manufacturing space. But what do you believe we need to take away from that, and what do you believe we shouldn't take away from that, especially if we talk about the running theme through this panel, which also seems to be that, look, we need to build brands out of India, not just manufacture in India?
The very first thing is that Indian brands are valued much higher than Chinese brands. So therefore, as it is mentioned that we should continue to invest in Indian brands. The second one is this theme will not go away at all, that we have to build a domestic scale in order to compete globally. And R&D and innovation is the only way. At least I think, it may not be applicable in a frugal industry, but in an industry like air conditioning, refrigeration, at least 1.5% of the revenue will have to be in R&D. There is no other go. And I may sound arrogant, but I think we have the talent to do that. It's forgotten thing in many parts of the world, specifically Europe and Americas, who are large consumers. They are behind in terms of energy labeling, green products, sustainability. Those technologies will come from India, and we are there. Unfortunately, the advertising expenses as a percentage of revenue will be discussed in boardrooms, not R&D expenses, because manufacturing itself was forgotten for quite some time. Thanks to the investments that were taking place in digital, those investments were measured, that what is your investment in digital technologies, but time has come for us to discuss about R&D investments. Most importantly, the one more point that had not come up is manufacturing as a sector never employed large number of women. And if we have to get to that productivity and capability building, women skilling and employment is very important. That is beginning to take place. You are now seeing my 60% of workforce is women. And imagine in digital manufacturing industry 4.0, it is easy for women to work. She mentioned about looking at the screen rather than the machine or lifting something. So that is an opportunity in R&D. We find women talent is delivering for superior results as well. So I think brand is very important. We will be doing better than China. In R&D, we will do better than China, no doubt about it at all. The next one is the governance perspective. The PwC knows that subject very well. I think Indian companies does that better. And in imagine net zero commitments and all, we do that and we demonstrate it much better than India. These are the things that we should. What we should not look at China is low cost stuff. We should not market ourselves as the low cost destination. Second is we should not be frightened by that scale. We should be able to demonstrate even with the scale, I can be globally competitive.
Yeah, no, and point well taken there on getting more women into manufacturing. We're starting to see that happen, but not enough. And I firmly hope and believe that we will see that decision being taken in boardrooms and being focused on. But Bharat, you know, you talked about the many sectors that Hitachi is operating in and what you believe are the competitive advantages at this point in time. If there was the need for any intervention specifically today to ensure that it is easier for you to get to that 20 billion aspirational target that you've set for yourself, what is it that you would like to see? Many measures have already been taken, but anything that's pending, any unfinished reform on the table that you would like the government to take forward?
So to the first part, I think fundamentally, you know, in the Western world or the developed world, Industry 4.0 happened before Society 5.0. And that's what unleashed. In the Indian context, society suddenly became very entitled and empowered, and industries, various generations coexisted in India. And that is now becoming an attractive situation for investments coming into industry. But innovation and change, there's no doubt that that is going to give you the leader versus follower advantage with the scale that India provides. But today, innovation, largely described by startups and everyone else, has been, the first phase has been more at the aggregator level. The asset classes have existed at high single-digit returns or very low double-digit returns. So when you offer energy as a service, mobility as a service, infrastructure as a service, like the classic Netflix versus Disney debate, there will be a sweet spot of convergence when aggregator and asset owner will have to marry. So the focus of propelling this is like the Israel example, invest in people but with a certain cap when government encourages them. So that public investment and private investments are both incentivized. There's a whole lot of public investment happening. To incentivize private investment to become competitive and use the higher margins with access to global markets, we will have to say that, okay, government will cap return at say 20% or 23%. The rest of it is going to be shared from the aggregator to the other investors. And then you will say that, you know, there's so much of money waiting today that can come into India.
I thought we wanted less government, not more government.
No, but I mean, to the point that, you know, where do you like to see the change? It's important that we recognize it as the industry and together make it happen.
Yeah, well, speaking of making it happen, let me get targets from each one of you. And Arun, I'll start with you, and then Preeti, I'll come to you next. You know, what is it that you see yourself on, the trajectory that you see yourself on over the next 5 years? What is that going to mean now in terms of future investments? What are you going to be investing most in? What do you believe the size and scale of your business is likely to be, given the opportunities that you listed out in the next 5 years?
So, Serin, our objective is to reach to 30 million ton by 2030, and we have laid out, you know, roadmap for that. But for reaching, you know, that level, I think important is to really work on all those, you know, efficiency parameters. I told you I'll just once again pick up this ESG thing. So JK Lakshmi Cement, we have kind of decided to be 100% renewable energy by 2040.
Okay.
So we are already there at about 47%. We are going to be 100% renewable energy by 2040. we have also taken a place to be, doubling our energy productivity, right? So what we call it, we are part of that, group also. So whatever energy we are kind of consuming today, with the same energy we'll be producing double than what we are producing.
Okay.
So that is the second thing. Third is on non-fossil fuel uses. Currently we are at about 4 to 4.5%. Our plan is to go to 16%. So apart from this, volume, what we are targeting going forward, I think important is also to work on efficiency parameter, which is closely related with, ESG, ambition which India has. So to be, net zero by 2070.
Yeah.
We are going to be net zero by 2050 around. So
Okay.
that is what our ambition is. If we kind of put everything together, then I think we'll achieve that, 30 million ton by 2030.
Okay,
This is what the
30
plan.
million tons by 2030 and then net zero by 2050. Those are the two aspirational targets that you've set for yourself. Preeti, the targets that you've set for your business over the next 5 years.
Well, as I said, we are a energy storage and solutions company. So one of our key targets, which is very well aligned with India's renewable energy target, is to drive the growth of solar. To that effect, we've already invested ourselves into a PV module assembly plant, which is going to be operational early next year. So essentially, we become the one company that does PV modules, inverters, and batteries, all of it, end-to-end component. We want to be a technology company which makes in India and invests in R&D in India. We also have a second aspirational target is to propel that growth of solar solutions into off-grid and on-grid markets for the consumers, save them a lot of money, and make our economy sustainable and renewable at the same time. So we share that aspiration with a lot of people here. And I think the third part really that's super important to us is really exporting. We heard a lot about, building brand. I am proud to report that we've entered into South Africa. You'll be surprised, Shireen, how acknowledged certain Indian brands are in markets such as Lebanon and in South Africa. And there is much more to us beyond Commonwealth cricket and curry. There is also our innovation. So I think that is recognized in certain markets, and we want to build 4 or 5 regional hubs where our brand is the preferred brand of choice when it comes to solar and storage solutions. And we want to do all of that in a very sustainable way while investing in society and planet alike with net zero ambitions attached to all our manufacturing plants and best-in-class practices. We hope to learn and curate. But I'll end in 3 words because, I do agree with the panelists that R&D and technology IP is at the heart of all of this for all of us. So I think the big thing that drives this is have the courage to create and compete.
Have the courage to create and compete. Copyright to you on that.
No, I'm happy to share this one.
Preeti, but Mr. Lal, 5 years, lay out the Dixon growth roadmap for us. I'm not asking you about next quarter, so there's no confidentiality issue or guidance issue there.
Well, in our industry, there's a very high element of dynamism. So 5 years for us is a long period. We are fairly confident that we'll double our revenues from $1.5 billion to $3 billion in a couple of years. But more than the financial and the revenue side, we are really working, and that's our aspiration, that we want to become an engineering powerhouse. We want to really focus on Industry 4.0. We have aspiration that at least a couple of our plants are lighthouse. Sanjeev very aptly pointed out that many of us get lost out in what we call as a pilot trap. That we launch a pilot and we're not tenacious enough to sustain it. I hope that we do sustain it. We're committed to it. Because only when you're able to achieve those deliverables for your customers, both domestic and global, we'll be able to pursue the journey on which we have embarked. Second, we definitely feel that in some of the product lines, it's going to be Dixon-owned IP, it's going to be Dixon-owned solutions. So these are the larger aspects apart from the financial numbers.
Well, we look forward to that being a reality as well, and hopefully sooner than 5 years. But we'll be closely tracking that story as always, Mr. Lal. Mr. Tyagarajan?
5 years from now, our business is cooling the 3 things life depends upon: air, food, water.
Yeah.
And I would be very happy if Blue Star's 25% of the revenue comes from exports. We are not worried about the domestic market. in global market, here is an opportunity for us to participate with our own IP. That's what I would.
So 25% over the next 5 years of revenue from exports.
If you fast forward to 2000 FY 29, if Blue Star's 25% of the revenue comes from export markets in sustainable cooling solutions for air, food, water, I'm not focused on air conditioning alone. Preservation and life extension is very important market for us.
Sanjay?
So, Shireen, public knowledge, we're 26% EV in terms of revenue. We're going to 74% over the next 5 years. We've positioned ourselves successfully as an automotive technology company. We hope to continue to be an automotive technology company just by increasing the kind of technologies that we're adopting. We're already looking at autonomous. We bought a company recently that is in the autonomous space. We hope to continue to go down the technology path and just keep investing in more and more technology and grow as a technology company.
Bharat? Outside of the 20 billion.
I need 7-8 years to get there. But yeah, we're very big on rail business. Washington DC's metro is going to be built in India, which is the world's largest metro contract. And we are investing also in the society citizen-centric services like education, health and payment. Our joint venture partner is State Bank. All Kendriya Vidyalayas in India run on our platform, which was showcased. So we're going in many directions to get there.
Well, that's great to hear, and that's a wonderful headline. The Washington DC Metro is going to be made here in India. Thank you very much for sharing that. Sudipto, what's the PwC headline number as far as the manufacturing opportunity over the next few years?
Well, on a lighter note, I would say that I would really wish all my esteemed panelists to succeed in their goals, and we would be more than happy to support them in that. In terms of what we are seeing from a manufacturing sector perspective, I think there are 3-4 key themes. The first theme which comes up very clearly is that how do you become in the camp of the customer, if I can borrow the line. And there is a huge amount of innovation, there is a huge amount of ability to, in fact, move from B2B to B2C. And there's a huge amount of investment which we are seeing is happening in the industry where organizations are trying to collect the data of their end consumers, not just their immediate consumers, their end consumers. So that's one. Second is, I think, resilience, which we probably briefly talked about, but I would want to bring it up as an important point, is something which we would all have to cope with, given the fact that, if times can be good and times can be bad. But how, as an organization, first of all, can I anticipate a challenge in the future? If I'm not able to anticipate a challenge in the future, am I resilient enough to immediately incorporate those changes in my supply chain and in my entire value chain? Now, for doing that, I think strong ecosystem is going to be very, very important, because in future, it's not that organizations will compete with each other, ecosystems will compete with each other. And what I mean by that is that if there are challenging times, if you're able to manage your suppliers and your customers and your broader ecosystem, you will emerge more stronger going forward. The third thing which I see is the hard investment and the soft investment. The hard investment is what we talked about from an R&D perspective. But we should not underestimate that we are actually considered as the knowledge hub of the entire world. And how do we leverage that in terms of leveling the playing field, in terms of moving our capabilities in the software, on the data side, on the analytics side. We spoke about, and from a cement perspective, you spoke about the fact that how do you create the golden batch, which can significantly improve the quality and productivity by just looking at the data. So I think that balancing of the hard and the soft from a R&D and from a technology perspective is significantly going to level the playing field for us. And that's where the inflection point will come for us anyways.
Yes, in those points of convergence lie the big opportunities that we've been speaking of, Mr. Srivastav. 5 years, you gave us a glimpse into what could change potentially as far as Maruti is concerned, but leave us with a more detailed script.
Okay, so 2030, okay? Volumes, domestic, 3 million. Export, 7 to 800,000. And some OEM supplies, so total 4 million. That's our overall volume target. In terms of powertrain, 15% EV, 25% strong hybrid, and 60% mix of CNG, biogas, flex fuel, ICE. That's third market share, 50%. Okay, we'll take PwC help also. But yeah, in terms of sustainability, the emission part, we are the lowest at the moment, 105, 106 gram per kilometer. We intend to be much ahead of others who are at 125, 150 also. We intend to keep that lead. Third, in terms of our objective, it will be the same, which is to provide the joy of mobility to more and more Indians. And finally, if you look at what we will be a mobility solution provider.
Well, you wanted to say something, Mr. Lal?
It's so beautifully articulated.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, that, it's such a clear roadmap of where they intend to be, and we look forward to you being able to achieve those milestones. 5 years is not a very long time.
With help of PwC.
With the help. Sanjeev, you've got a lot of work to do. So to sum things up, because we've got the final minute here, Sanjeev, I think the enthusiasm has translated into actual execution at this point in time. I think whether it's domestic industry or it's foreign industry looking at India as an opportunity to make in India for India as well as make in India for the world, I think many of those pieces are starting to fire at this point in time. Just your sort of big headline over the next 5 years that you expect from the manufacturing space.
So I would say only one thing additionally, which is to be inclusive. And I say that because, you will not be net zero if your supply chain is not net zero. Maruti would not have been where they are, but for the fact that they had such extensive support for them, right? I mean, they've created a whole township around it, etc. So I think being inclusive is something which is very important, because that transgresses each of the transitions that we are seeing at the moment. Sustainability, energy transition. So being inclusive is very important. Of course, we discussed, about getting more women in the workplace and so on and so forth. But I would say that while we do all these good things, we navigate scale, we navigate technology, we leverage data, and we focus on research and so on and so forth, we ought to be inclusive. And that, I think, will craft the success that we wish the industry has.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to each one of you today to get a perspective on where things stand, not just as far as your own companies and your own organizations are concerned, but more importantly, to talk about this country strategy that we must walk forward with, the plan that we must have as far as India's manufacturing sector is concerned. Thank you very much for sharing your shared learnings and your experiences, and for being so generous with swapping those ideas and those lessons here on the panel. And of course, for those who are watching, there's plenty of valuable insights that you can take away. That's the idea, really, ladies and gentlemen, here of putting together the CNBC-TV18 PwC dialogues. It is to have a free, flowing conversation on issues that matter, on sectors that matter, on themes that will make a difference as we drive the India growth story. Many thanks to each one of you, and thank you to all of our viewers on TV and YouTube for watching. We'll see you again with another edition of the CNBC-TV18 PwC CEO Dialogue. But for now, from all of us here on the team, goodbye and many thanks for watching.